Welcome back to our second student episode. As we mentioned last week, we're releasing content created by our Baruch College students over the past year. And this work comes to us from different sections of LTS 1003, Latin America, an Institutional and Cultural Survey, LTS 3012, Latinas, a Social and Cultural Survey, and LTS 3085, Latinx Screens, Film, TV, and Video. For these classes, we each offer students the option of completing a podcast episode for their final project. Other options might include a paper, a video, or a social media-based project. It depends on the course. Since students are assigned to listen to podcasts throughout the semester, they grow accustomed to what they sound like, and it helps them plan out how they might want to present their own research in this medium. For most students, creating a podcast was something they had never done before, and we're proud of them for stepping outside of their comfort zone and trying something new. Kudos. At the end of the semester, we asked students who submitted a podcast episode for their permission to share their research on this platform. A handful of students granted us that permission. Last week, we brought you 3 student projects from LTS 1003, 3012, and 3085. This week, we'll be presenting 2 more student projects, one from LTS 1003 and the other from LTS 3012. As we mentioned before, their work is presented as they created it with very minimal editing for sound levels and similar such issues. We have not edited them for content. In this episode, we feature projects by LTS 3012 students Maritza Cintron and Kelly Heeralall. Maritza and Kelly were students in my spring 2021 class. The other project is from LTS 1003 students Karla, Alberto, and Jennine Ramos. Maritza and Kelly's project focuses on Latina stereotypes, especially those around the hyper-sexualization of Latinas, dual identities, and machismo. As part of their episode, they reference some of the works of literature we read in class during the semester, including Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, Don't Ask Me Where I'm From by Jennifer De Leon, How to Leave Hialeah by Jennine Capó Crucet, and Once I Was You by Maria Hinojosa. Genesis and Karla's project also looks at women, but under very different circumstances. They study the Trujillo dictatorship in the Dominican Republic and investigate the treatment of women at that time both by the dictator himself and men in general. Both projects consider the treatment of women and question what can be done to change these historical precedents. We hope you enjoy them.
Buenas noches a todos. Welcome to the Late Night Podcast with Maritza and Kelly. I am your host, Maritza.
And I'm Kelly.
For newcomers on this podcast, we focus on social and cultural topics.
So today's topic is discovering Latinas. It's sad to say that nowadays people tend to ignore Latina issues, from media to politics to social media and the media. It showcases Latina women as spicy, loud, curvaceous, passionate, criminals, very religious, and sexual. And that's how society views Latinas. However, no one asks a Latina herself what it means to be Latina. And that's my question for you, Maritza. What does it mean to be a Latina?
Well, it's more complicated to explain in just one sentence or in a few seconds. That's why I'm glad that we're doing this, to dig a little bit deeper today and inform people.
All our Latina viewers, this week's podcast is dedicated to what it's like to be a Latina in the U.S. in 2021. And today we will indulge in topics such as hyper-sexualization, dual identity, and machismo by utilizing experiences from rare Latina authors and showcasing how identity impacted Latinas culturally. We mentioned hyper-sexualization in the beginning. What are your views on it?
Well, Latinas have been portrayed as the embodiment of desire for years. And the blame falls on the media that helps perpetuate the image of the thick accent, curvaceous, sexual, light brown skinned Latina that is waiting for her white savior.
What do you mean by white savior?
I don't know if you noticed, but in all the movies where there's a woman that is the maid or just the poor girl that happens to be a Latina, she always falls in love not with a Latino man. It's always a white man with money that comes and saves her from her misery.
Yeah, and that's another issue. They're portraying Latinas as gold diggers too. They need a white man to take them out of their quote-unquote misery.
Exactly. That's why I blame it on media.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, besides the fact that brown bodies have been over sexualized and exoticized by Hollywood, especially their breasts and their behinds. Kelly, one would think, what is the problem with being considered sexy? And the problem is that not all Latinas are curvaceous or have light brown skin. It gives society the wrong idea of what these women are supposed to look. And it's putting unnecessary stress on young girls that do not feel identified with cultural icons like Jennifer Lopez or Salma Hayek.
Nowadays, we have these little girls who want to look, not even little girls in general. I know when I was in middle school and actually in high school, I wanted the hourglass body. I wanted the big chest. I wanted the thighs and everything. But that's how media portrays Latina women. And I'm telling you, I know I'm not Latina, but most of the people I follow on Instagram happens to be Latina. And how their body looks like is how you defined it, Eddie.
Have you seen like the tiny waist and the big hip?
Yes.
So when I moved here, I realized that Latinas are portrayed all like big boobs, big butts, and tiny waists. And back home in Peru, it's the same thing. But then I saw people from other places that didn't have huge breasts. And I didn't have huge breasts growing up, but I felt the need to fit in and to be like more attractive to guys to get breast implants. And I got them. But now I realized that it was not because I needed it, but because I felt that I was not a woman because I didn't have big boobs.
Nowadays, people are always praising Jennifer Lopez and Sofia Vergara, which she's beautiful, of course. Everybody knows how beautiful she is. But everybody looks at her and, she's aging as she gets older. And then people are like, oh, Sofia Vergara from 1995 to 2021 and her body's all different.
That aging is also a crime for women in general. I think tropicalism is one of the problems here because it erases the fact that we are all individuals. The idea that we all have to look the same, it's just crazy. People think about bright colors and rhythmic music, brown skin to being a Latina, and like tight clothing and the hips and breasts and brunette hair to being a Latina woman. And it shouldn't be like that, but it's the idea. If you mention to a guy, hey, what am I talking about? Red colored lips, tight clothing, curvaceous hips. I'm pretty sure he's going to say Latina.
Yeah, definitely. If you were to tell me that, I would probably think a Latina woman.
How did we all end up in one box? Can you try to explain that to me? It's crazy, right?
It is crazy.
Latina women get harassed and sexually assaulted in public because men think that we are there for their consumption.
How Latina women are, their body is the reason why they're Latina.
Have you seen the movie Hot Pursuit with Reese Witherspoon and Sofia Vergara?
I have not, but I've seen like the covers that was on the billboards and actually the bus a few times.
Exactly. I'm talking about that same billboard. So in the publicity poster, we can see Witherspoon standing with crossed arms, dressed as a police officer, and the phrase straight shooter next to her.
Looks very mature in that picture.
Uh-huh. And on the other side, we see Sofia Vergara with a shirt that accentuates her waist and breast next to the phrase dangerous curves. Even the way they're standing, one is all serious, like I'm formal, and the other one is like, hey, come here. Like,
yeah. Oh my God. Definitely. Why is the white woman seen as a professional, more mature person? And you look at her, she's looked at as the sex doll.
There's a study that says that people tend to racialize and genderize media representations. So this is exactly what is going on here. People are going to see this, and they're always going to think about white and professional and being a Latina and practically not so professional and being a flirt.
That's terrible.
I know. There's so many examples. Like there's a book called Clap When You Land with Jahaira being sexually harassed while riding the train. And
I'm sorry. I have read that book, and I truly love that book because they go over a lot of things in that book, but especially the one what you mentioned with the harassment. Amazing point to bring up.
And again, we see like men entitlement to just take what they think is there for their consumption. And we're not a product out there. We're people, crazy. Now, dual identity is a topic that is not discussed as frequently, and it's definitely an issue. Many Latinas live a double identity in a sense that the person they are at home and the language they speak and the way they act is many times not the same as the ones performed outside their homes. So let's hear you with more information.
Dual identity is basically the struggle Latinas go through. Well, Latinos for now go through living in two cultures. For Latinas at home, they embrace their heritage while balancing America, which is very whitewashed. And it's difficult because being a woman in Latinx culture while balancing an American culture is difficult since she is said to not be true to her culture. I was reading an article, and basically this woman, this author, Claudia Ortega Lucas, she moved to the US, and I've heard of Spanglish. I've heard of Latinos getting a little mixed up with Spanish and English. And apparently a Latina with higher education is judged based on her language.
The better your English is, people assume you're smarter. And if you have an accent, if English is your second language, so you get stuck with words, apparently you're dumb, But they do not understand that we have to translate in our heads. Like I literally have to translate in my head, and then it just comes like out. And there's so many words in Spanish that do not have a translation in English. And there are also some words in English that I just do not know how to say in Spanish. So that's why sometimes I use Spanglish. But yes, I definitely get judged a lot. People do not know how I sound in Spanish, and they find it hard to believe. Like I have a bachelor's in finance back home. And if I tell them that, they're like, what, really? They're surprised because I do not always have the right words to express myself in English. So it's frustrating. It's really, really frustrating.
But yeah, Claudia was talking about how she felt like she didn't belong in her country because she knows English, she knows Spanish, but she feels like her balance with her home language as well as her second language become difficult because her family will say she is whitewashed. Claudia was talking about how she got called malinchista. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Malinchista.
Yes. She said Latinas with accents in school, work, or any public area in America would be judged. Whites will tell her to go back to her country, and then there's a struggle. There's a struggle that she has to balance with her English and her home language.
I have a story about that, but it was here, right? Her experience in the school in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got judged a lot because I was in second or third grade. My English, I have an accent, and that didn't change. So I don't know what that professor was thinking, but he was wrong. He got me standing in front of the class for like an hour repeating burger, because I can pronounce it right. And I said, well, no, if I can. But I was like, burger. And he told me, no, you're pronouncing it wrong. Eventually, you're going to get the words right, but you just need your time because this is completely different. It's a different language. And the fact that we know that a burger is an hamburguesa, we're already doing a lot. We're learning, we're kids. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then when I was reading through the article, I remember her mentioning, and I'm quoting from this, however, for a long time, I felt like I didn't belong here, and I didn't belong in Mexico either. Navigating two worlds was not precisely difficult, but sometimes unsettling. You spend your time switching from English to Spanish to Spanglish, and back again. You mix chula with Five Guys hamburgers. You watch American soccer but listen to Mexican commentators. And you truly think Mexican soccer fans are like the old Oakland Raiders fans, only worse. Women in Mexico are rabid fans, and many men, but at least back in my day, you didn't see many women go to stadiums. I know that's a lot to take in, but how would you differentiate yourself from Peru and America?
We're definitely more conservative at home.
Yeah.
I know we women are supposed to be polite, always sweet, and to a certain point submissive, but not that much, because like my grandmother, she's not submissive at all. She's a lawyer and she will fight her ground. But other women I've seen that are really submissive, and here in New York, I've seen the women are wild. Honestly, they're like, we have the same rights, and they'll fight for it. But little girls are not as polite as back home. Like back there, we're like really nice to older people, and we say please and thank you, and we keep our voice down and stuff like that. And here, I just don't see it. Like, I don't see that same respect for adults, but maybe that's just the area where I lived. I don't know if it's the same everywhere.
No, because I was brought up like that, to be a good person, good girl, don't talk back to anybody. But at the same time, my parents definitely gave me, don't let people walk all over you. And it seems like you were brought up in a very great family.
Oh, thank you.
Another book I was reading, I don't know if you ever read it, Once I Was You, by Maria Hinojosa.
Mm-hmm.
And she brought up something really interesting, and I want to know if you ever felt it. But let me tell you what she mentioned. So in chapter 6, she had an interview for a job, a production assistant, right? And the interviewer said, "I have never met a Latina, Ivy Leaguer, radio producer, international traveler who loves theater, speaks 2 languages, and is so politically aware. I doubt there are any more out there."
That is crazy. It's honestly crazy. We have a bunch of really smart, educated Latinos in general, but the problem is that maybe they do not get the chance to be there because their resume didn't make it to the person that is making the call, or they get judged by their name and just put aside. We don't get the same opportunities, and we're not all starting from the same start point. So I just think that people are not realizing that there's more Latinos out there looking for chances, and they're really smart. They went to good colleges, and they are capable. They just need an opportunity. When they give us an opportunity, we can prove that we're capable, and then they're willing to give other women the chance.
Most cultures put their pride in men. I know for the men are more dominant, and this is known as machismo, which is men are the ones to lead the family. And for Latinos today, it's actually a major issue.
So let's start with machismo then. Let's start with a basic definition taken from a dictionary. What is machismo? It is a strong or exaggerated sense of manliness. It is a strong or exaggerated sense of power or the right to dominate. In Latinx community, machismo is similar to a disease. It seems to be having a really attached definition to our culture. And it's really, really hard to get rid of. And the question is like, why can't we get rid of machismo? And it's because we keep raising our kids with the same outdated ideas that come from gender roles. Patterns are very hard to break, especially the ones ingrained in people's minds for centuries. Machismo is dangerous for society. Men believe they have to be the alpha male and women have to be submissive. It's just outrageous, especially if it brings violence, right?
Yes, definitely. I was actually reading through a couple statistics, and 34.4% of Latinas have experienced domestic violence, and it happened to actually rise during COVID-19 because roughly half of Latinas report domestic abuse.
Like the men that used to go to work now are stuck at home.
Yeah, and then for Latinas, in many cases, it would be said that she's going to be ashamed to the family if she reports the abuse. But she's getting abused physically and mentally. The fact that you have to bring that it's shame, it's like it ruins the reputation of the family. It's really disheartening. And for Latinos in many cases, many times they think they caused that reaction and the man is innocent. And in other cases, they are afraid of repercussions. For example, more violence towards them and their children being deported.
Yeah, that's really messed up. And I think women support this. The victims become a supporting agent because the mother of the guy is like, oh, she's not listening to you? Beat her up, like, pégale, que aprenda, she has to learn. Everything that they went through, they're telling their kids that that's okay behavior. They need to put their women down for them to be good wives. And the mother of the wife might be like, oh, pero qué hiciste? What did you do? What did you do to cause this? Oh, he's a good man. Just be a good wife. It's your fault. And you can't leave because then you leave your kids without a family. What are people going to think?
35.6% of Latinas have experienced sexual assault and other forms of rape in her life. And then 13.6% of Latinas reported to being sexually assaulted forcefully in their lifetime. And this number increases drastically over the years. So I'm pretty sure it's going to increase if we don't stop it. But
and I think this is linked to hyper-sexualization because people think that Latinas are just hypersexual, and a woman that is a sexual being, and they start thinking, was she really raped, or did she want it? Was she asking for it?
Why is family important in Latin culture?
Okay, let's go to feminism versus machismo. Family is very important because in Latinx culture, feminism places the family ahead of an individual interest. Because we, back home, sometimes we tend to live all together. I don't know if it's a thing here because I think in white families, like you're 18 and then you're an independent being.
Yeah, oh my God.
My
God. I can definitely relate to that.
So, and being in a house where the man is the head of the household and men are supposed to protect women. That's how it's seen. And women, we love the idea of family, of being all connected. We are raised that way. And in some sort of way, it enforces machismo because it creates that pattern of men being the ones taking care of us. And they show the need to dominate.
It's like a cycle because it's definitely going to repeat. Another great example that I actually read was in Cop When You Land by Elizabeth. And she states, in the real world, I am not treated as a lady or as a queen, as a defender or opponent, but as a girl, somebody want to strike off the board. And do you think family plays, with that quote, do you think that family is the reason why?
I don't think so. Because if you live in a home and your dad is obviously the adult, it doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, you live in that family, you're still a girl. That's why I don't like the word girl, because it makes us less than men. So I think that has a lot to do with the patriarchy and all of that.
Definitely.
Like men are men and women were girls, That's why they're not taken in consideration. They shouldn't be on the playing field. They should be outside watching the game and cheering for the men to win.
How does it represent current day Latinas?
It represents the struggle that we have in the playing field and in the workforce. We need to work double or triple as hard to be able to enter and be successful and get to the top, because we only don't have to fight stereotypes. We have to fight like the glass ceiling, and it's a lot of more work because we are not considered as smart and we don't have the same privilege as a white male.
I totally agree with you.
To conclude our podcast today, in all, we believe it is necessary to stop generalizing all Latinas as one size fits all. It feeds into people's ignorance, causing racist encounters and negative attitudes toward the Latinx community. We come from 21 different countries, heritage, culture, and even skin tones. We cannot all be summed up into the same category. One day we will have daughters, nieces, sisters who will grow up living in a society that will constantly ignore these issues because culture gets in the way. Our Latin women will continue to face mental health issues, get raped, assaulted, and abused. But what happened? Some will take their lives. Some will keep quiet. Not only that, little girls will follow in their mother's footsteps and not take their education and grow up to be young mothers who will have encounters with machismo and other issues. The cycle will continue if no changes made now.
Welcome to the podcast of Trujillo's Dictatorship. My name is Genesis.
And my name is Karla. So we'll be talking about Trujillo and his dictatorship and how he treated women. And our thesis for this project is that Trujillo has made significant political and economical progression in the Dominican Republic during his dictatorship. Despite these improvements, Trujillo's dictatorship did more harm than good, including the massacre he caused that killed many people, including women, his machista lifestyle, and his treatment and thoughts towards women. I chose this topic because personally I'm Dominican and I learned a lot about him during my life. So I felt like I wanted to put all that knowledge on paper and really bring all my thoughts together. Because what really touched me was, or what I really wanted to find out was his effects on women.
Nice. I also agree. I was super interested in his treatment towards women. But when Karla came to me with this topic, it really called my attention because I've really been interested in dictatorships, especially with the countries that I'm from. And the fact that I never heard of Trujillo before really blew my mind because he's a really known dictator and basically because of all the horrible things he's done. And I'm glad that I've been able to educate myself on it and how it has impacted women overall. So, who was Rafael Trujillo? So, according to history.com, because, we don't know him personally, Rafael Trujillo was a dictator who ruled the Dominican Republic for more than 30 years. He has been credited with improving sanitation, constructing new roads, schools, and hospitals, and increasing the general standard of living for Dominican people. Despite these accomplishments, he participated in heinous human rights abuses, including the torture and murder of thousands of civilians. Women of the Dominican Republic at the time suffered the most during his reign due to the little to no respect he had for them all his life.
Yeah, and Genesis mentioned some of the things that he did accomplish for the Dominican Republic, but honestly, I think that with everything that I've learned in my life, he was a really bad leader. Yeah. I feel like he influenced a lot of men to act just as he did. And I see a lot of Trujillo and a lot of Dominican men I know now. And it's crazy because his reign ended years ago, but it's true. He enjoyed being known as the most powerful man in the Dominican Republic. But being powerful didn't always mean you're a good leader. And he definitely was not.
I agree.
And so we're going to start off with gender roles during his dictatorship. And what I first want to mention is this quote that I found on Google about him. And it says that the treatment of women under Trujillo contradicts the image his regime was trying to create. I mean, like, wow, what does this quote really tell you about him? Let's get into how he really treated women during government. So, in the government. So, women would, in fact, be a part of politics in the Dominican Republic and get jobs in the government. But the jobs will never be as serious or as important as the government jobs given to a man. Women weren't really taken seriously by Trujillo, and he probably set the example for how all men should treat women in the Dominican Republic, ultimately with no respect. Nothing he did was genuine, and he always wanted something out of everything he did. However, it is worth mentioning that Trujillo gave Lina Labaton Pitaluga queenship, but in the end, she was Trujillo's puppet. I also read an article by Lauren Derby that said, and it seems Trujillo knew that giving Lina the queenship would create a large debt that would have to be repaid. She was expected to praise him because of his queenship, and that's really crazy. He was a true manipulator, and everyone saw it.
Wow. I don't know, for some reason, I just like saying her last name, Pitaluja, but anyway, or Pitaluja, sorry. So, yeah, I feel really bad for her because it's almost like she became a little laughing stock, you know what I mean? Like, she thought that she just got the queenship and that people were going to look up to her, like she was going to be a woman influencer, like she's his pareja, you know what I mean? So
yeah, and I saw that.
Yeah, for that, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but for that to happen to her, like, it just goes to show how gender roles are in society and how gender roles in the world were at the time, because you never really saw women in politics. Men were always the ones working or known to be the one as working, because people always said, oh, that's not a woman's job. And I know for a fact, like us being, Hispanic or Latina, you still find that today. You still find the gender roles today saying women belong in the kitchen, women belong taking care of the babies. So I can only imagine how it was about, 60 years ago, 40 years ago, and how she felt, because it must be super frustrating that men always get the opportunities to be in politics, to have jobs, and women just don't, just because they're women.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. And also with Lena, is that her name? I think that's her name. With Lena, I read something that also said that she was like talking about how she was queen now, and she was basically not even like putting herself up. She was basically just talking about Trujillo, how he's king, how he's the best. Literally, like she was mentioning nothing about herself. She was just praising Trujillo. Yeah, that's so crazy to me.
And it's perfect because, like, now that we talked about gender roles, we can talk about machismo. And it's clear already that he was super machista, and that was just part of his personality. And machismo, what machismo is it comes from toxic masculine roots, which is also known as masculine pride. And to just break it down a little more, just in case anybody that's, you know, reading the slide doesn't understand what it is basically when men are thought to be superior to women. Men are thought to not be allowed to express their feelings. Men are thought to do quote unquote manly things. And just to give off examples, women are supposed to be seen as sensitive and fragile because they express their emotions. So when a man is seen to be crying, it's not manly enough. So that's where the toxic masculine part comes, because the real right thing to do is to allow humans to express themselves the way they want to, despite their gender. But toxic masculinity doesn't allow that, and teaches young boys or anybody that's easily influenced to just strictly believe that they're supposed to be manly and that they're not allowed to express themselves I don't want to say the right way, but the way that makes them happy. So clearly this man did have a lot of masculine pride, and it definitely played a role with how women were affected and treated in the country under his reign.
Yeah, and I saw that you mentioned that it fell on a lot of young men, and I feel like it's true. Like, a lot of young men followed him and wouldn't treat their wives right because they knew that Trujillo, their president, was doing the same thing. So because they saw that their president was doing it, they thought like, oh, I don't have to treat you well. I can have 3 wives. I can have a wife and a girlfriend, you know? And I feel like that was really messed up. And he like didn't even care that he was influencing all these men to act like this. Or he didn't know maybe, but I feel like he really didn't care.
Yeah.
So I found this quote in an article by Nancy Robinson, and she said that this action represented a sheer calamity for the Maribel family, who were subsequently harassed, imprisoned, and ostracized by their neighbors. No amount of formal apologies by Minerva's father sent in writing could undo the slight to the dictator's machismo. The Maribel family were one of Trujillo's biggest victims, but we'll talk more about them in a later slide.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about them in a later slide, but I also did find this quote that says, not only did his relationship with his wives show that he had little respect for women, but his inclination towards the female community suggests that he held a sense of entitlement that accelerated his manhood. By Janisa Mendoza, To Be a Woman, Gender, and the Death of the Maribel Sisters. And the reason why I said that, I'm sorry about bringing this up, is because the Maribel sisters just play a huge role into basically exposing how horrible he was. But I don't want to spoil anything yet. I just can't wait for that slide. So, slide 6.
Let's get into how he actually treated women. So I want to say that this is what really drove me to want to do this topic, because it really fascinated me how he really treated women and what he did to them. So he always wanted women to obey him. He wanted women to do as he said, and he used women for his personal use more than just like being professional. And he would often invite young women to big dances that he would do in his home that were quote unquote for his presidency and for his job, you know. But he just wanted to do these parties to get women to attract to him. He was notorious for kidnapping women in the country and going after women from families with strong social standings. By showing that he had no consideration for the emotion of women, one can assume that he saw them as objects. Therefore, the assassination of the 3 defenseless women, the Mirabal sisters, was unproblematic to the dictator.
So, everything that you just told me honestly kind of grossed me out, because I feel like we're keeping it PG, but reading other articles and just looking into him, he was really just a horrible man and disgusting. And I don't really want to get a little graphic, but if I were put in the position that all these women were in during that time, I probably wouldn't be able to survive it, because what he was doing was just vile. But it leads into a quote that I found in Elizabeth Manley's book. Sorry for my pronunciation. Ajusticiamiento of the Dictator of Rafael Trujillo. So she says, on the afternoon of August 10th, 1959, several dozen Dominican Cuban women gathered in the streets of Havana. Dressed in black as though headed to the funeral, they mourned the political situation in the neighboring Dominican Republic. Specifically, they targeted the dictator Rafael Trujillo, calling him the Jackal of the Caribbean, as they paraded through the streets carrying place cards and visiting newspaper offices. They were focusing attention on their specific struggles as women and mothers. Their posters read, "Dominican women support the revolutionary government. We ask for the expulsion of Trujillo from the OAS, and we represent the mourning of the assassinations committed by Trujillo," they told a Cuban newspaper. So, wow, Jackal of the Caribbean. That just tells us that other countries, because these were Cuban women, are seeing what this man is doing to the nation, you know?
Yeah.
And if the fact that it's women speaking out goes to show that it's women women helping out other women, you know, like they're there for each other. They see what these women are going through. They see his treatment towards women, but they're also highlighting all of his assassinations. And I want to talk about this later on in the podcast, but I know for a fact that even though other innocent people that weren't women were being killed, it hurt women, because women were losing their husbands and their children, their mothers, their fathers, and it's just like so much mental abuse.
Yeah, and I feel like
a
lot of men were like, you never saw a man going against Trujillo. Like, men were enjoying this maybe. Like, I haven't seen an article yet or something written on the internet of a man talking bad about Trujillo. It's always, everything I've seen is women.
Yeah, because most of the men that were being killed were the only ones that were I guess like the ones that were backing up the women, you know?
Yeah.
But other than that, you know, you wouldn't find it. You're right. But here goes about how they were being impacted. So I guess this slide is still appropriate to come after the quote I read, because the quote that I read clearly shows that outside people were seeing how the women were being impacted. So when women did start to stand up to him and avoided going to his dances, his home, and getting caught in his power, he treated them with no respect. And he was known to support feminism, but it obviously was to a certain extent. And it was to the point that they resented him for his dirty tricks. And I'm assuming that's because he acted like he supported women's rights, but that was basically to lure them in, which is just gross.
And they were noticing it.
And then they refused to just accept whatever Trujillo was handing to them, because they knew that he just had bad intentions, and women were objects to him, so they weren't even human. And it's just sad, because the women themselves knew what they were to him, and at this point they were self-aware. And I'm glad they were self-aware, because there's so many women that when they're getting abused, they just stay in that situation because they aren't able to help themselves. But I'm glad these women were able to speak up.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like this is the worst thing he did. He impacted the women in his country who were supposed to be supporting him, but obviously they wouldn't even do it, because they were finding out everything that he was doing and catching on to all his little tricks. And I feel like he left women traumatized, and it wasn't only in a blue moon. Like, this was an everyday thing for him, a regular daily thing for him. And women in the Dominican Republic didn't deserve a president like Trujillo, honestly. So now we're going to get into the Mirabal sisters. So when I was little and I was first learning about Trujillo, the Mirabal sisters and their case was what was taught to me first. So this is something that I know the most about. And from what I know, they intervened with the government issues, and they quote unquote knew too much, and this is what got them killed. But online, when you search them up, you'll see that their death was caused by a car crash, but that's a total lie. Although this was a lie, it wasn't a lie that fooled anyone in the Dominican Republic. Everyone knew that Trujillo was the cause of their deaths because of his built-up anger and aggression towards them. these women were famous for questioning Trujillo's politics and going against his many beliefs and rules, and they refused to just go along with Trujillo's treatment and disgusting behavior towards women. They were expected to stay quiet about politics because he probably thought that it wasn't a woman's place to speak. But because of this, they helped to organize the underground movement challenging the regimen. The Mirabal sisters were also arrested multiple times because of their acts against Trujillo, but it didn't stop them. They died to change women's rights in the Dominican Republic, and if they were alive today, they would definitely be proud of themselves because the day that they died marked the beginning of the end of Trujillo's reign. That's so crazy to me.
Yeah, it's just a touching story because he's not the first dictator to just shut down people that are, going against them. Because dictators basically tend to get rid of anybody that's basically a chance to, get their power taken away, because dictators obviously don't want that. And what these women were doing, what were almost like what the Cuban women were doing, just speaking about him publicly in a negative light to make sure that he's gone and harming no more girls. So I feel like, I'm sorry for their loss, but in a way, their death also helped these women because it was brought to light. It was brought to light, and people were finally seeing him for how horrible he was. And by people, I guess I mean a bigger population. You know what I mean? For something to actually be done, for somebody to actually want to do something, which is basically going into our conclusion. So just repeating it again. During Trujillo's dictatorship, women has had the worst time due to his machista lifestyle, killing innocent people, and the poor treatment he had to women overall. So I think this leads to our conclusion mostly because we just have to let you guys know that he was assassinated. And obviously the person that assassinated him did everybody a favor. He was just an evil person, because even though he was treating women the way he was treating them, just the massacre he caused, I think it's the parsley or I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I know it starts with a P. But yeah, he's just a vile man, a horrible man, and I never really wish death upon anyone, but there's just no positive thing, because even him having economic success happen when he came into power isn't enough to convince me that he was a good president, because a good president has to be a good person, and he was not a good person.
Yeah, and I feel like even though this is the end of our project, I want a lot of people to get into Trujillo and really know how he affected women. So I want to recommend this book to anyone who's listening, and it's called In the Time of the Butterflies by Julia Alvarez. Although this book is nonfiction and it's not completely true, I learned a lot from reading this book in high school. And this book is about literally the Mirabal sisters case and how Trujillo affected them personally, just them, even though he affected many more women. But yeah, this book is really good for anyone who's trying to really learn about the Mirabal sisters and Trujillo in all.
I was actually supposed to read that book in high school, but for some reason they decided to skip it. But I'm probably going to get the book myself, because I have seen it. I have been recommended that book multiple times, so it's to the point where I should get it. But one more thing I just wanted to touch upon, because I know throughout the podcast you've been mentioning that he still has an influence on men today. And I remember our original I guess topic was supposed to be about how women are impacted still today from Trujillo's dictatorship. And I guess based off of the information that we have now, just the fact that he has been an influencing the people that were alive at his time, that trauma passes down by generations. So that's why I'm assuming, I guess that's why I'm assuming that when you said that men still choose to treat women poorly, it's because generational trauma passed down. So guys, little boys were seeing the way men were treating their wives, which was their moms, and they thought it was okay, and that's why they're doing it that way to their own wives today. And it's really sad, but it's actually pretty common, in Latin American countries and Caribbean countries and Hispanic countries. But is there anything else you want to add, Karla?
Yeah, no, I know a lot of Dominican men now, like when you meet a typical Dominican man, sometimes they'll be like jolly and happy, but most of the times when there's like fathers and like big figures in the Dominican Republic, it's mostly men like dictators. Like it's a lot of men trying to be a dictator, going along the steps of Trujillo, and I still see that now. And I see like a lot of like men are mean and like pushy and, you know, what's that word? Like toxic, basically.
Oh yeah, toxic man. Oh, so like basically my
Yep, basically. And I see that now in a lot of fathers and grown men in the Dominican Republic.
Wow, so it's just crazy to think that this man is still doing horrible things to the country, you know? Like, he just has a long-lasting effect. And I guess this is a perfect place to end off the podcast.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed as well. And I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation between Karla and I.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks again to our students from both this week's episode and last week's for sharing their work and contributing to these special episodes. Next week, Rojo and I will be back with fresh episodes. This season, we will be prioritizing Afro-Latinidad. First up is Afro-Latinidad, television, and film. As I mentioned last week, in this episode, we'll be considering intersectional representation in the FX series Pose and the film I Like It Like That. In the meantime, let us know what you think. Share your thoughts with us. You can always reach out to us on social media or by email. Follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at LatinxVisions, or send us an email at latinxvisions@gmail.com. Subscribe on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Share us with your friends and family, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review on both Apple and Spotify. It really helps with the algorithms, getting more listeners, and more visualization on the podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.